we present you three major arguments. Number one on employability, number two on optionality, and number three on leadership. Starting off with our first argument, we tell you that our first line of analysis is that it is better suited for status quo. What do we mean by this? Panel, the old model of a stable, decades-long career in a single industry is long gone. For example, according to LinkedIn and Bureau of Labor Statistics data, today's graduates will likely hold 10 to 12 jobs across multiple industries in their lifetime. Why does this matter? Because if the economy demands mobility, the graduate who can pivot, the generalist, is vastly more employable. Compare that to specialists who sink years into one narrow field only to find it shrinking and walking beyond their skill set. Our second line of analysis talks about cross-functional roles. We tell you that roles like product management, operations, consulting, and even leadership demand versatility across skills and industries. Modern challenges like climate change, digital transformation, or supply chain crises often aren't solvable by just one area of expertise. These problems require understanding of systems, ethics, technology, and society. And at the entry level, where college graduates actually begin, companies aren't hunting for ultra-specialized talent. Why? Because the reality is skills age fast. What you learn in university today may be outdated in 5 years. So companies just prefer to hire generalists that can adapt, and they prefer to train them in-house for their specific frameworks. Because 2 years later down the line, they might have to use some other framework. Moreover, we also tell you that companies today are leaner. Startups and even major firms want talent that can wear multiple hats. Exception.
You're saying generalists are the future, so why do industries that define the future like AI and biotech actively shut them out the door?
Can you repeat?
You're saying generalists are the future, so why do industries that define the future like AI and biotech actively shut them out?
That is a mischaracterization by side opposition. We tell you that major companies like Google, Microsoft, Amazon, they all hire generalists because they can actually wear multiple hats. They can take part in marketing, analytics. For example, let's take the example of AI ethics. We want engineers that are not only good at AI, but that can actually code, but also are ethical. And stuff like coming on to our third line of analysis, which is reduced redundancy. Specialization is risky when industries collapse or automate. Consider radiology, once a prestigious specialization, now facing pressure from AI diagnostics. Or look at legal research, paralegal, or even journalism. Tasks requiring years of expertise are now done faster by machines. Generalists, by contrast, are shielded from redundancy because of two main reasons. We tell you that their skills are transferable, that they don't rely on just one task or one industry, that they're more likely to be able to upskill quickly, having built broad learning habits and adaptability. Now, our world wins on employability because most industries rejected. We don't need to win every single niche. We need to win the average graduate, and we do by preparing them for volatility, not stability. Our second argument is on optionality. Let's remember, college graduates are often 21 or 22 with often little to no work experience and no experience. And okay, suppose you do decide to specialize in a field and you put tens of thousands of dollars into it and invest so many years into that field. And then all that effort, and after all that effort, you see that industry declining, or that it's being automated, or that it's not what you actually want to do, or that market is saturated. You would feel so helpless. You would feel so wrong. Panel, expecting college graduates to choose a single lifelong professional identity at that age is risky and often unfair. An OECD report notes that workers in narrowly specialized fields face comparatively higher rates of long-term unemployment after job loss compared to those in flexible roles. And suppose you don't buy any of this, we still tell you that even if employability is at worst the same in both worlds, which it is not, this lack of optionality gives you very poor return of investment when you've done all that hard work, money and time, and only to be left with hyper niche expertise and no fallback. On our side of the house, generalism often allows individuals to explore interests, to gain interdisciplinary exposure, and make informed choices about eventual specializations once they have clarity. This leads to better job satisfaction, performance, and well-being in the long run. We agree that specialization is important with the right timing. Coming on to our second argument, which is third argument, which is about leadership. We tell you that leaders need to understand many departments, except.
If generalists are so adaptable, why is it that when things go wrong, it's the specialist who fixes the problem, not the generalist?
Hello. That is also, once again, a heavy mischaracterization, because we tell you that the major people that are in the highest roles are people that can manage different people, and we tell you that these people can actually take places in management, in CEO roles, etc. And we tell you that leaders need to understand many departments, manage teams, align visions, not write code or do lab work. Specialists often get stuck as individual contributors, which they are trying to say. And we tell you that generalists move people into management and strategic roles. Why? Because deep knowledge in one area does not automatically translate into leadership capacity, which requires breadth, perspective, and adaptability. We tell you that on our side of the world, our generalists have upwards mobility and influence.
Okay, Pranay, you want to hold for a bit?
I would like to end with one of the most common quotes that we've heard today. We've always heard the quote, a jack of all trades is a master of none. But not many people know that it has an extension to it. A jack of all trades is a master of none, but better than a master of one. With this, we would like to propose, proud to propose. Thank you.
We'd like to thank the speaker for their final speech. We now welcome the first speaker from Team Opposition. Further, this is when you ask for the keep the mic a bit further away. And also please remember to space out your PI and give 15-second intervals between PIs.
Speech is good.
Archit.
Okay, so before I start, I just want to say I was forced to do this by my teammates here. But I would just like a moment to thank everyone who's, we've been debating for 5 years, and I think everything we've ever learned in debate, it's all come down to this, I'd say, and I'd just like to thank all our teachers who support us, our parents who are present here today, our school staff, management, and all of them. It wouldn't have been possible without us, without them today. And also, one last thing, I was forced to wear this bow tie. So I'll be starting now.
Archit.
Start in 3, 2, 1, go. And I find it both funny and problematic how team propositions can just simply assume how a person who has spent years specializing in a particular field, has years and multiple years of expertise, experience in a particular field, has literally specialized in that field, is literally symmetric to a person who has a general overview of multiple fields and multiple domains, etc., etc. It's just problematic and it's just simply flawed, and that is just not how the real world works. And I'll be telling through my framing and rebuttals how, and we'll be presenting to you like the actual status quo and how the world is looking like today. 3 things in my case. Firstly, framing. Secondly, rebuttals. Thirdly, argumentation. Starting off with some framing panel, and my framing is also going to have like integrated rebuttals to their framing, and we'll be weighing off how our framing holds the upper hand today. Firstly, and most importantly, what do these college graduates look like? What do they want, and like what do these colleges offer to them, and how does the education system in and of itself look like? And most of these college graduates, we tell you, are like rational economic actors. They spend like 3 to 5 years of their life, often spending hundreds and thousands of dollars on higher education with like the primary goal of increasing their employability, because they have already explored multiple interests, multiple passion in like high school and early years of university. What they really want is A, financial stability, and B, job security. What does this college life look like? And we already tell you that on our side of the house and in the status quo itself, this college life is already pretty generalized. Panel, 3 points under this. A, we tell you in both high school and undergraduate studies, students already engage with like a broad curriculum like maths, language, science, history, etc., etc. So they have already experienced multiple things. They know what their interest is really for. Most colleges also, especially like in the first 1 or 2 years, offer a variety of things and offer a quite some flexibility on what the person really wishes to pursue. They mandate like this breadth through like general education requirements. We tell you students often try out different various courses across departments before actually choosing their major. This ensures like by the time they specialize, they've already experienced various fields and they know what they're doing is the best for them. The passion which they're trying to follow is already given to them, and even like if these specialized programs, like as proposition says, how they have this whole leadership point integrated in their arguments and all of that. No, thank you. We tell you that it's literally symmetric on our side of the house as well, right? What we're telling you, if you're doing a physics major, it's not like you're not going to learn how to communicate with others. You're not going to learn communication skills or leadership skills. There's no course in the world who just properly only teaches you physics or maths. What we're telling you is, like, by the time a person graduates, they don't really need to seek further exploration. We're telling you they want clarity, direction, and tools to actually enter a competitive market. Like generalism is already the foundation which they've gotten in like high school and early years of university. By the time they become college graduates, they need to specialize in something because that is what's really needed to get a job. Secondly, what does the job market look like in the States? So we're telling you it's saturated, specialized, and unforgiving to ambiguity. What we're telling you here is that the rapid expansion of higher education means like a bachelor's degree no longer carries like the same signaling value it once used to do 5 to 10 years ago, especially like generalized fields like business, communications, etc. We're telling you the job market wants depth and not vague adaptability. The whole point about how companies want people who can adapt and how we're giving them like a lack of opinion literally does not make sense. Why? Because firstly, we're telling you specialized have like literal expertise in whatever they're doing, and companies would not want someone who's just like a general overview of marketing, communications, etc. They want actual people with actual problem solving abilities, and you cannot have that problem solving ability if you haven't spent years working on it, experiencing all of those things, and that's just a flawed case on their side of the house. Secondly, we're telling you that there's a lack of opinion argument which we get from that, and they tell us how there's no fallback, etc. Panel, we're literally telling you, that already by the time they become college graduates, they've already explored all of these options. So it's very, very unlikely that someone would really want to switch after like so many years of exploration in and of itself. And secondly, we're telling you on our side of the house, we still give you that option to do so, because when you have like this financial stability, when you have the job security, it allows you, gives you like this fallback option. On their side of the house, there is no fallback option because you literally cannot like go and like risk anything else because the job market is such that you cannot do anything else. Now, thirdly, what is it like a real comparative between generalists and specialists? We're telling you both of them are essentially at the end of the day going to get jobs, but the quality is what is most important and the trajectory of these jobs. We're telling you the labor market is such that it rewards sharp and role-specific competence and not like just shallow versatility, right? And this is what the status quo inherently is looking like. Now, most importantly, one major argument which we get from them is like it's better suited for the status quo. And two responses to this. Firstly, we're telling you, giving them like a false sense of security. Adaptability is not equal to employability in the status quo. That's not how it works. We're telling you generalists may be able to like switch industries, but switching inherently also requires like new learning, rebranding, and providing competence. Specialists within a deep field itself will be able to switch much better. We also give you that option to switch within your field itself. If you're doing computer science, you can go from like data science to like AI learning or something like that. You still have that option here. But if you just do a generalized code, that option exists, but it's like an illusion of choice because really companies really going to prefer people who have expertise in field, and they're obviously going to side with someone who can actually bring profit to their companies. And secondly, we're telling you in disruption, whenever like employees are being cut or like recessions take place, etc., we're telling you generalists are the people who are going to be cut off first because you're not really bringing anything new to the table, and even a person who's like specialized in a field will have things like leadership, communication skills, and all of that. A physics major will also know how to talk to people, right? That's literally not how it works. Now, coming on to the two major arguments which we provide you in today's debate. First of all, specialization maximizes job security and like fulfillment in this hyper-competitive labor market. And two layers under this. Firstly, we're telling you, we're giving you this job security and economic return. How does this work? And we're telling you, why do specialists really earn more in the first place, right? Because companies have an incentive to pay for certainty, and because of the impact of the work they're about to get done, because of the profits they're able to bring, because of the clients they're able to serve, like a data scientist or like a civil engineer or a medical technologist solves domain-specific problems from day one. This literally like reduces onboarding costs, like training costs, and they increase the ROI which they're spending and investing on these employers. We're telling you, specialists aren't just employees, they're like investments at the end of the day. Even a study from like Harvard Business Review shows that employers reward deep expertise with higher pay and leadership track positioning. Comparing this to like generalists on the other hand, their contribution itself is very diffuse at the end of the day. A study also shows that the starting salary of someone very specific, like a petrol engineer, would be close to $100,000, where if you go on to like a generalized field like computer science, it comes down to 75K, and then communications and like something generalist is 45,000. This gap compounds over time in and of itself. Now, secondly, what we tell you is fulfillment through this in and of itself. What we're telling you, at the end of the day, if a person is able to provide for the family, do well in life, and the principle here, what we're telling you is that if they're able to really be satisfied with what they're doing, the whole point of how they'll be more productive does not really stand into this debate, because we are giving them this happiness, we are giving them this satisfaction of having a job, having a good life, being able to serve for people, being able to serve passionately for the people. Now, I think proposition by our framing and arguments are already out of the debate, but if they still have a chance, the second speaker needs to answer, why do they assume that a journalist is same and equally as competent as a specialist? Thank you.
We would like to thank the speaker for their fine speech. We now welcome the second speaker from Team Proposition.
Shall we start? Okay, I'll be starting in 3, 2, 1. Good evening to one all present here. I'll be the second speaker for Team Proposition, and as the second speaker, I'll be rebutting Team Opposition's case while bringing up new arguments and proving to you why we are having a better value in this debate. Yeah. Now, moving on to the first major rebuttal in this debate, which Team Opposition's entire thing was about how colleges already contain flexibility and they don't need centralism after that. Well, we would like to tell you that job exploration and becoming a generalist to attain jobs is different from becoming and studying specific subjects, right? That is not the same thing here. Why? Because what we study in school isn't something that what we are using in our jobs. What jobs require is something that's completely different from what we have studied. So being a generalist in this stream will make you to be able to actually learn about what you need to do in this particular job. So you will be able to cover more of the job market than Team Opposition falsely claims to. Now, number 2, what Team Proposition said was about how adaptability is an illusion of choice and how they're going to end up with not being able to suit it to any industry at all. Well, number 1, this is not true, because actually when these these career generalists, college graduates, when they are prioritizing career generalism, what's happening is that they are not only gaining experience in many other fields. When you are trying more, you're going to be able to get succeeded in one. And number 2, what they're talking about was about how starting salary is going to be less for these generalism, etc. Right? But generalists may start slower, but they outlast specialists in the long run. They pivot better, lead better, and are more resilient to industry shifts like automation or market collapse. To this, they bought up and realized that rejected. They bought up and told us that we could switch careers, or we could switch jobs in the industry, in an industry itself, right? Well, number 1, when an industry collapses, it does not mean that only a part of an industry collapses, right? Still, they are still under the risk that their entire specialization, their entire targeted approach is being rejected, is being obsolete here, right? Well, we are not running the same risk. Now, moving on to answering the question what Team Opposition asked us about why do we assume that career generalists and career specialists are going to be the same in the long run, right? Well, as I already said, these specialists, like they themselves agreed, they are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars and they're spending a lot of time trying to specialize in this one field. What are these generalists doing in that particular time? Earning salary, right? So when you look at it in a wider perspective and in a longer term, we give you the better work. And number 2, we are not denying specializing. This motion does not say that we have to heavily prioritize college graduates. This motion says that we have to instill a sort of mindset, right? Number 1, moving on to my first main argument, which is about a generalist approach encourages broader, more ethical and socially conscious thinking, whereas specialization often breeds intellectual tunnel vision, right? Now, number 1, they're talking about niche industries like biotech, the example they bought in POI. Well, panel, biotech is an integration of different industries, which is better done by a generalist than a specialist, right? This is something that they are completely ignoring on their side of the house, right? reasoning. Why specialists spend years focusing deeply on a single field, which can cause them to lose sight of the bigger picture. This narrowness can lead to critical blind spot. We are not rejecting the fact that there are some jobs that only specialists can do. We are talking about what an average college graduate should pursue, what an average college graduate should prioritize, while they are talking about what the niche few people should prioritize. Right? They have never really told us as to why prioritizing specialists is going to help you in the long run. Right? While we are telling you how these generalists prioritizing them is going to help you in the long run. Right? Example: consider the 2008 financial crisis. Highly specialized financial engineers created complex derivatives without fully grasping their real-world impact. Right? We need knowledge. We are not rejecting the need for knowledge here. What we are saying is that let them get career generalism first, and then they can specialize later. This is mentioned by our first speaker also. Why? In this way, they can truly figure out what they want in the current job market, right? Because studying physics or history does not necessarily mean on what you want to actually take up as your job, or what do you contribute to the society. No, thank you. Right, now moving on to the impact. A workforce dominated by generalists promotes ethical, cross-disciplinary decision-making that considers social good, not just technical efficiency. This makes institutions more accountable, reduces harm, and leads to better governance in both public and private sectors. An important statistic to note is that every specialist requires around 3 to 5 generalists working around him, so that every research made by him actually reaches to the wider public. This inherently proves our fact that we need to prioritize college graduates to be career generalists. Now I would like to compare the best case and worst case scenario and prove to you all why we have an upper hand in both our best case and our worst case. What is our best case, or our utopian case, right? Where these universities and grads emphasize cross-sector skills.
When according to you is the right time to specialize?
Look, the thing is, your specialization comes as a choice. Number one, we are not forcing people to specialize, right? Like how they do. There can be some people who are not able to, who actually want to specialize after being generalists, right? There isn't any particular time that you have to do this, right? So we are not really here to specify on what time. We are just here to say about what college graduates should do, not what their life decision after being a college graduate is. Right? Because what we are giving them is a choice here, but they don't really provide that choice in this case. Right? So now what is our best case scenario? Imagine that graduates are more resilient in a volatile job market, industries like tech, consulting, public health, and education. Right? Now let us consider their best case scenario. What are they going to talk about? They are talking about how they temporize more students and how it actually can also wide adaptability. Why does proposition still win in this situation? Generalism matches the future of work, where change is constant, automation threatens narrow roles, and global problems need broad thinking. We have already reached the saturation point where we have figured out the major technology. What we need is integration between these technology and actually moving them further to a more innovational medium, right? This is something that only generalists can do. And again, we are not rejecting the existence of specialization as well. And we are not talking about niche places like medical or academia, etc. We are talking about what an average college graduate should do, which we are providing you a better case scenario while they are not. Now, moving on to the worst case scenario, like what are we talking about in our worst case scenario? Let's assume what all they said was true about how these grads may not get the highest salary, etc. Why is still better than their ops worse? Imagine they do specialization and their industry falls. Who's going to be in a worse position? Panel, I would like you to consider the situation that even in our worst case scenario, we are providing you a world where these grads can survive, whereas in their best case scenario, they are providing you a world where they completely collapse. With this, I would like to end my speech. Thank you.
We'd like the speaker for the final speech. We now welcome the second speaker from Team Opposition.
This world doesn't reward potential, it rewards precision. Because proposition sells you fantasy, that knowing a little about a lot of things will keep you safe. Because in today's world, in either the world, when a job interviewer asks, what can you do better than anyone else, the generalist remains quiet, the specialist answers. Then let's do 4 things in this page. Firstly, rebuilding the opposition case. Secondly, some direct rebuttal to whatever we've heard from proposition. Thirdly, an extension argument. And lastly, some weighing. Then, rebuilding the opposition case in today's debate. We tell you so many things. We tell you how on our side of the house you're like more likely to make more money. You're more likely to have more success. How it's like more likely because you as a specialist can stand out. Only 2 points of responses we hear from proposition. Firstly, they tell us, oh look, these specialists. We tell you that we already have like general skills because your high school curriculum and college curriculum forces you to like sort of learn these skills. They tell us, oh look, but the soft skills that you learn in your school cannot really be applied in your workplace. How? They don't say anything. But then why do we tell you that still happens on our side? Because it's very important that in today's education system, they have a very big focus on like soft skills. Things like the 21st century education where students need to like learn how to adapt, learn new things, not just confined to the textbooks, but also be able to learn, analyze and develop the critical thinking. Secondly, about the idea of this illusion of choice. Notice how even on their side A, firstly, gaining experience in like multiple industries is so hard. They say it so easily. Oh look, we'll just like gain experience in multiple industries and it's easier for us. How? It's harder. Because for a specialist who has so much knowledge about one industry, it's easy to get internships, it's easy to get job opportunities, you have connections, you focused on this one area for so long, you're more likely to succeed. How are you more likely to succeed in multiple different sectors? They don't really tell us anything. Secondly, they tell us, oh look, we're more resilient. How? This easily the ones who are like more resilient. Because in their side of the house, you like already like do very general things which AI is like more easy, more likely to do. They don't really tell us why exactly are they the ones not more likely to be replaceable. We tell you the specialists on our side of the house have more niche knowledge that AI cannot really learn that instantly. So obviously they're like more replaceable. Even at our work, you still see they like set a cap on the potential of these students. I'll tell you later how. Then let's directly engage with the 4 major points Prop tells you and let's break down everything they tell us. Firstly, they talk about employability. 5 responses to this. Firstly, notice how it's like general descriptions of these jobs. So, they might fit the general description. Okay, you have good communication skills, you can handle people well, but they still don't really satisfy the specifics of each job description. Because in today's world, jobs are like very, very focused, very, very detailed. They don't really satisfy those requirements. So even at their best, they maybe get shortlisted for a job, but they never really get that job. B, notice how in their world, probably the biggest flaw in proposition's case, there is no objective metric. Because in their world, when they promote generalists, okay, you have good communication skills, you can handle people well. How do I, as a college graduate who's fresh out of college, who has a focus on being a career generalist, stand out? On our side, if you're a specialist, you can have more knowledge, you can have more experience, you can have better research papers, you can have more internships, you can stand out because knowledge is an objective metric. You can test someone as to how much knowledge they have if they have more knowledge. General things, no metric. It's subjective. What does happen? It's hard to stand out, and this is most likely to be biased on their side when they actually choose people. Then nextly, notice how this is another thing about proposition's case. They misunderstand what knowledge and theory looks like. Because for years, if you specialize in something, you don't just read a textbook, learn it, and go write that in the exam. You understand what that field demands, you understand the different concepts. If you study physics, you probably understand the way physics changes. So even after 5 years, knowledge is not outdated because it's not something you learn in a book, it's your understanding of that field. So you're obviously more likely to be able to transition, more likely to find alternatives when things get worse. Nextly, they talk about how this choice in our side of the house. Notice how on our side, you can still switch. We offer you that choice because they make it as if, okay, if I have a degree in biomedical, I can only do a biomedical job. No, if you have a specialized degree, you can still transition. Even in the industry, internal choice exists. Multiple jobs exist because you don't do a degree only to get one particular job. You do the degree to gain knowledge, to gain experience that lets you do multiple jobs within that same industry, no engagement. Secondly, notice how there's still a cognitive burden on their side of the house. Because notice how when you have so many things to choose from, it becomes much more harder for you to choose something that's worthwhile, to find your passion. Fulfillment in general becomes much more harder for them to choose. So many things to choose from, more cognitive burden. Next, when they talk about things like leadership, A, it's literally inexclusive. It's something based on the personal traits of the person, not whether they focus on being a generalist or a specialist. Notice how when they talk, oh look, senior positions in companies, CEOs are all like generalists. Notice how those are not college graduates. Those are people who are 50 or 60 who are much older, have gained experience. Even Sundar Pichai, even Bill Gates probably started by being a specialist. Only then they became the CEO of Google and Microsoft. Lastly, they tell us how exactly is it better for them in the long run to like be generalists, and they ask us, why exactly is this niche important? Notice how like you will only tell you better employability opportunities because you're more likely to make more money, because you're more knowledge, you're more likely to get the job. Secondly, because when they tell us, become specialists later, it's too late. C, because it's like more easy to stand out on our side, and even at our worst, even if you do nothing, you still have knowledge. So in your worst case, you can still do something with it, start a business, or later get a job. It's still possible on our side. Then, taking out everything proposition said, even if you don't buy all of that, let's give you an extension on opposition to prove why opposition wins this debate. Let's start with the idea of how generalism dismantles institutional integrity. Couple of layers into this. Firstly, notice that institutions are built on specializations, not adaptability. Because the core point here is that modern institutions, whether it be hospitals, courts, or corporations, all are not designed for versatility. It's to do a specific job. So in a hospital, you don't want to have a generalist giving you anesthesia. You want someone who's specialized giving you anesthesia. In a courtroom, you don't want a generalist giving, I feel this person is guilty. No. You want someone who knows the law. You want a specialist because they can do a better job. The problem here is that there's a structural asymmetry in proposition case, because at the end of the day, generalists still rely on specialists at the end of the day. Then secondly, notice how generalism undermines ownership, accountability, and meritocracy, because when college graduates embrace generalism, if something bad happens at your workplace, if you're not able to complete a certain task, on their side of the house, it blurs the lines of responsibility, it weakens accountability structures, because no one really knows what's happening. Okay, I'm a generalist, we're working on some CS project, I'm the project manager, but I don't really know what's happening. Then how do I take accountability? No, that can't happen. On our side, when we are specialists, we can take accountability, we can own up to our failures. Lastly, in terms of generalism eroding institutional memory and long-term resilience, notice how there's still bias happening on their side, because when it's so much harder to stand out as a career generalist, people probably start, picking people based on other factors like ethnicity, sexuality, or your race, etc., etc. So in general, at the end of the day, we tell you why on their side of the house, career generalists are literally set up to fail, whereas on our side, specialists, even at our worst, can still achieve something because they have knowledge. Let the opposition world prevail. Thank you.
We'd like to thank the speaker for the fine speech. We now welcome the third speaker from the team opposition.
Put down and make sure. It works. Why does this font scan look so ass? Can I hold? Wait. Okay. No, it's an Is it your phone? So ass. Is it your phone?
Starting in 3,
That's
2,
so
1. Good evening, judges, fellow opposition team, my own teammates, and observers. As the third speaker, before I move on to summarizing and emphasizing the points of my own team, I'd like to refute some of the points proposed by the opposition team. The opposition team keeps on saying that it's one of the major arguments that they keep on saying that they offer the same things that we do. And for example, a generalist can also shift into different fields in the same industry. They give some examples about how a CS scientist can move into AI field. But what they don't realize is that when you've specialized in a certain niche skill for so long, it's like moving in concrete. Whereas when you're younger, you have the brain capacity and the adaptability to gain various skills and to move around. Whereas an older person, to even shift a little bit is really hard. Imagine yourselves around like 30 years later, understanding the things that the younger people understand. Is it really going to be that easy? No, it's not, because that's how we humans work. They also talk about a petroleum engineer and a CS scientist and how a petroleum engineer earns more. But do they also realize that petroleum engineering is a dying industry? We're all moving on to renewables like wind and hydro, and petroleum is dying. So what about all those people who are doing these specialization in these kind of industries? What are they going to do? How are they going to adapt? Whereas a CS generalist can still get jobs because CS is a booming industry. They also talk about like I've said, they also talk about how, that in school itself you can decide, in high school, you can decide what kind of career and what kind of life you want to live later on. But what we've proved to you that it's not the same. You might think that something suits you when you're at school because when you're young, you have different liking. But when you actually start your work, even after college, the things are completely different. We can ask our adults and our parents that what they've learned in their bachelor's or their education is entirely different to what they do as a work. Maybe the technical education might be the same, but to do the same things in a job is completely different. So when you say that, oh, just because I realize that I'm good at this in school does not mean it's going to be the same when you're working. So it's completely different. They also talk about how how a specialist makes people unique, whereas a generalist struggles to stand out themselves. But if you're prioritizing everyone to moving into specialists, everyone's going to be doing the same amount of education. A lot of people are going to get good marks. So how are you going to decide on who has more knowledge or who's better? Whereas they talk about how an interviewer, when he asks about what makes you unique, the specialist can answer whereas generalist is quiet. But when they also ask about what makes you unique, a generalist can answer based on his broader picture, industrial training, and he can also answer about all the things he's learned from looking at the bigger picture. Because generalists don't only think about one industry, but they think about a lot of industries. Now you might think, why is this important? Well, they always keep on talking about one industry and how only a specialist can survive in that industry. But as you can see, a lot of companies these days cater to a lot of industries. Like, they don't just cater to the one industry they were created for. Eventually they move on, they branch out, they expand. And when you do that, there's a lot of cross-functional jobs. You need people with various amount of skills. So a person who's just done specialized training for years and years in something cannot be able to handle and adapt to these new surroundings and new industries. They also talk about, I'd like to point out something. They want to prioritize specialist training, specialists, and which is what the status quo is right now. But we can clearly see there's a lot of unemployed people. I wonder why. Because according to the World Bank, less than 10 to 15% of the jobs require specialization. So why is the opposition trying to push all people into specialization? I clearly don't understand why. And I've also proved why people making themselves unique as a specialist is much harder than proving themselves unique as a generalist. So I really don't. Opposition has to answer why they're trying to do this. Moving on. They also only keep talking that the only advantage of being a generalist is soft skills. But we've clearly said that as a generalist, you can understand a lot more. You can understand about how different industries work. You can have flexibility. Because companies have to keep changing their policies from one policy to another. There's a lot of uncertainty. Like, let's say when the pandemic hit, a lot of companies had to change their styles. So flexibility and interdisciplinary thinking, all of these skills come from being a generalist. Not just, because I was part of the debate team in school, so I have the same soft skills. They also talk about how a generalist, if he's a manager of a CS project, he won't know what's happening. But that's not what a generalist is. A generalist still has an undergrad. So he still has a good amount of knowledge of how CS works. So it doesn't mean that they can't lead a team of CS. They also talk about why that generalists are the first people to get laid, but which is clearly mischaracterizing, like my first speaker has already said. Because, like I've said, generalists have a lot of skills, so they can be shifted to different departments. Like a person who's doing one job but has skills of other departments too can be shifted, because it's easier for the company to shift an existing employee than hire a completely new employee. So whereas specialists who've done years of training in only one field cannot be. So they'll be the first people that be laid off. And we also, like our second speaker has also said, a lot of specialist jobs in the so-called future-defining industries like AI and industry and manufacturing can be replaced by automation. So why is it the opposition is trying to push more people towards a place which can be replaced, whereas we are trying to push people towards a place or an environment where they can make themselves unique and gain skills that AI cannot replicate. AI cannot replicate instincts and big picture thinking. They cannot do that, whereas humans can do that. They also talk about they also talk about how soft skills exist on their side, but we've said that deep knowledge into one area does not automatically translate into leadership capacity. An example of this is a study by Harvard Business Review that found that over 90% of 17,000 C-suite executives surveyed had generalist education backgrounds, indicating a strong correlation between generalist skills and leadership roles. Because being a generalist, being a CEO or a CFO or an executive does not mean you need to only have the technical education. You should have the ability to lead a team, to lead the company to success. Whereas our team has already provided a lot of examples. Like we've already said that how we are better suited for status quo, how we suited for more of cross-functional jobs which are on the rise, and skills can be learned easily at a young age, whereas they can't be at an older age. We've also talked about how industries collapse and only generalists can adapt to new industries. Thank you so much.
Oh, this one we have to put.
Hello. Okay. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1, go. Panel, I think the biggest indicator when a team loses a grand finals in debate is when they fail to engage with an entire line of analysis that opposition runs with, because they never really engage about the fact about how it undermines institutional integrity and creates operational frameworks. But like panel, here's the brutal truth that no one on the opposition wants to say out loud. When decisions hit and layoffs begin, generalists are the first to be filtered out. Why? Because they are the easiest to replace and the hardest to justify, because there is no metric. Proposition has still never given us a metric on how you can actually employ generalists in the first place. Because when budgets tighten, they don't cut the specialist who keeps the system running. They cut the generalist who never really truly owned anything. 3 things in my speech. Firstly, that rebuttal is taking down proposition at their best. Secondly, crash through different layers of analysis. And thirdly, break this debate down on like 3 different metrics: magnitude, vulnerability, and time frame. But like before moving on, one strategic mistake that proposition really makes in today's debate is trying to like opt into our benefits by telling that these people can like specialize later. Big question, because when you tell that shifting fields later is harder, but somehow specialization is not, because they pose a major question. Why can't like generalists specialize later? 3 responses against this. Late specialization is inefficient and expensive. The job market punishes late bloomers in and of itself. The earlier you specialize, the faster you get better returns, and the more competitive you become. Playing catch up then costs time, income, and credibility. Moving back to the framework that we already like settled this debate on, which is like stability and like security for like college graduates in general. Second like response: early specialization compounds like advantages in general. Why? Because specialists then gain seniority, build institutional memory, and climb faster. You just don't enter like tech leadership at 35 with a generalist resume. You get there by like compounding technical growth over time. Third response: generalists often never make the jump because the structural inertia is like quite real, partner. Most generalists on their side of the house get locked into like mid-skill, non-promotable roles, and by the time they realize that they tell that okay, we might need to specialize, they are years behind and filtered out before they begin. I think it's like pushing out like 4 major areas. Like firstly on like flexibility. I think firstly flexibility is not employability. Secondly, market does not reward switches, as I've already told you, because career switching is not frictionless. It requires retaining risk and often a financial reset, something that people have to like take a lot of like risk while doing in the first place. Thirdly, flexibility is a privilege, not a right. Because the wealthy can really afford to like try out different fields. Their entire like engagement is like quite like very disproportionate in nature. Because the majority of graduates can't afford a 6-month learning curve. They need that now. Jobs benefits the elite, ours protects the rest. Secondly, on like employability, they try to us that it's like quite transferable. 3 responses against this. Hiring is often like demand driven because like job descriptions are like often specialized at nature. At their best, people might be able to get employed in the first place, as I said, at an entry-level job, but there's no upward mobility because there's nothing much they can really learn. There's no scope for specialization. Thirdly, even if they get hired, this just proves that they can more easily be replaced, and I'll be like going under this like under my clashes. The third point was about how it's like hard to make a choice. Firstly, on like the illusion of choice. Secondly, these people are like never really satisfied. Why? Because there's always a cognitive overload, thinking that they might be able to get a better job because they are generalists in nature. They should have the option to like change their field, but because of that, they have a cognitive overload, never feeling that they have the best job possible. This is a real issue on like their side of the house. Thirdly, on our side, and the comparative is quite simple. Clarity reduces like career anxiety and like improves psychological like well-being. Okay, thirdly on this point of leadership, this really doesn't make sense, but I'll still engage because why not? Because panel, how is it exclusive? Because like university like already prepares you for like a lot of like generalist ideas, like communication, being a good leader. These are things that you learn at clubs. Thirdly, this is at like our worst, this is like even like a very personal thing in general. This is a personal thing. Are you a good leader? Are you good at communicating? This has no relation to like being a generalist at all. They needed to prove that they can like mechanize it in the first place. Then moving on, they say this entire claim on how the industry could collapse. But that is a very uncharitable characterization because the industry will always remain to like some scope. The specialists will always have an advantage because they always have more expertise, they have more technical like expertise as a whole. Thirdly, they give this major push at like third about how work is different than education. Apparently the core concepts still stay the same, but on our side of the house, while specializing, when you do internships, when you do projects, you get a better feel of the work that you're going to do in the future. What does the comparative look like on their side of the house? Because generalists will never have the feel for the job because they keep switching their job as a whole. Because finally, even at the end, proposition still does not give us a metric on how we can judge like generalists in the first place. Because when they also don't engage with the entire like argument that second gives you about how it undermines like institutional integrity and like create operational fragility. Why is this very important? Because we told you about like structural asymmetry. Secondly, about how like bias issues like stem in the first place because there is no metric. There's like other metrics that they have to judge other than skill. We give you like multiple layers of analysis on like why this works. Because panel, they still don't answer this major question on how you can like stand out as a generalist on their side of the house, which is why they like lose this debate. Okay, now moving on to like the major clashes of today's debate. On the first clash, which side provides the most stable life for graduates? Because as you already told you, like most graduates are like rational economic actors. They want to repay debt, they want to gain traction, they want to move upward. So what does this actually look like? This looks like on our side, specialists start ahead, better salaries, less retraining. While on their side, generalists often like stall at like mid-skill jobs, lacking both leverage and trajectory. Why this is very likely? Because companies want hires who deliver immediate value. The world is capitalistic in nature, and all of us know that. Let's talk about the next point on like psychological security. Specialization answers life's biggest questions early. Where do I belong? What problem do I solve? Generalists often like enter cycles of like existential doubt, role hopping, income stability, loss. Why does this clash therefore matter? Because it touches every single graduate. Because stability is not a perk, it's the fundamental foundation for fulfillment, freedom, and freedom. So why does this clash therefore matter? Because we also tell you about how the outcome of education is employability. This clash shows which part actually converts learning into livelihood. Now, even if you didn't buy anything in my speech, I'll prove in 15 seconds why DPS should walk away as national champions. Because ask yourself this, who gets cut first in a crisis? The generalist. Who gets trusted, promoted, and remembered? The specialist. Because this debate isn't about the lucky few who could afford to fail, it's about the silent majority. This debate was never about rage, it was about relevance. Silent opposition, thank you.
We'd like to thank the speaker for that fine speech. We now start with the closing 5 speeches.
Honestly, Aryan, they have an upper hand in a way. Yeah, you see, specialists, you can't really.
It doesn't matter. Last dance.
Pranay.
Last dance.
Pranay, but only the second guy is actually good. Umesh.
I'll start in 3, 2, 1, go. Panel 4 strategic mistakes that cause proposition today's speed. Firstly, notice how literally in a grand final debate they still don't engage with two of our most primary arguments, which was on how we have like more job security and how we have like potential for like better economic returns on our side of the house from our first speaker. Second speaker, we tell you how there's like literally operational breakdown and how things like bias can enter into workplaces, because when there is no objective metric, when you judge people on very general things, bias is likely to increase. Two such good and like two such important points of analysis, probably chooses not to engage with it. I think that only tells you who wins this debate. Secondly, notice how they never really prove why generalists can like survive in this market, because I think one thing that both teams like agreed on in terms of framing was that it's like a very volatile market, there's a lot of uncertainty, so where there's like a lot of layoffs happening. Why are generalists the people who are like less likely to be laid off? Their answer, you can probably switch them around into different departments. We tell you specialists are simply like more secure, because on our side of the house, it's like harder to in general like fire these specialists as compared to generalists, because in that side, firstly, generalists are like less likely to get hired in the first place. Even if they do get hired, on our side, specialists just have like more knowledge. They have things to offer that AI cannot really replicate. Things like dealing with people, things like delegating tasks, general things anyone can do, AI can do it. Specialist things they can't. And lastly, I think the biggest flaw in their case, two more flaws, was that they were really specific when they tell us things like, oh look, generalists have interdisciplinary skills and thinking. I think they just pick those phrases off of Google, but they don't really know what it means, because they never really tell us why do these things, why does this general understanding of things, why do these interdisciplinary skills or things like these actually matter. They never really tell us. And lastly, they have a very flawed understanding of what specialists look like, because in propositions world, they keep telling us, oh look, these are people who have locked into one possibility. That's not what specializing looks like. Specializing means attaining as much knowledge as possible, attaining as much experience as possible in one field, to understand how it works, and then diversify, and then like see where that knowledge can help, maybe in that particular field or even in another field. Then let's quickly go over the multiple points of engagement in this debate, and lastly go over the clashes. I think the only argument that probably gives you that still maybe stands at the end of this debate was about like a point of employability. But we still tell you how in today's world, jobs simply require more and more specific job descriptions. They tell us, no, jobs need more general descriptions. Why? When AI is rising, when jobs are more uncertain, the generic things are easy to replace. The specific things are harder to replace. It's simple logic that Bob never understands. Secondly, we tell you how there's like more objective metric on our side of the house. Then let's move on to the clashes and like integrate it, because there's like no time. Firstly, when we talk about the context of how job markets look like, when we talk about the likelihood of jobs, they tell us, oh look, it's easy to stand out when you're a generalist. We already tell you that at the end of their three speeches, they still don't tell us why exactly is there an objective metric on their side of the house to differentiate between these career generalists. We tell you already that even when they tell us, oh look, there's like so much competition on your side, when you're a career specialist, things like marks matter, things like your experience matters, we still have a metric. There is an objective metric. If you're good, you're good. If you're good, you get that job. On their side, being a career generalist, how is that going to help you stand out? Okay, I have good communication skills, choose me for this job. Yeah, that's not working. Then, next thing, when we talk about the second major clash on more fulfilling lives, who offers more fulfilling lives for these college students, we talk about how there's more fulfillment. Why? We tell you multiple things. We tell you how students have like worked their whole lives for this, because they tell us, look, you need like soft skills because you need general skills. We tell you colleges already prepare you for that. And not only that, colleges in today's world are more and more increasingly offering more and more specialized courses. For that reason, you spend most of your time, you spend most of your money for this, so you're probably going to do something related to it, and you're probably going to earn more, you're probably going to have a more stable job. Another big point they don't choose to engage with at all, cognitive burden. I'm a generalist, I'm hopping from one industry to another. How am I going to choose? It's so much pain on my head. Top never engages with that. So funny. Last year, macro impact, we tell you bias exists, operational breakdown exists, macro impact, how it affects society, but then they only care about the career generalists, but then they're not getting a job on their side anyway. So we tell you how society as a whole, within our side, choose a world where college graduates prioritize being career specialists. Word opposition.
Like the opposition to the advice speech, and the last speech in the debate, the proposition and the advice speech. Yeah.
I'll be starting in 3, 2, 1. First of all, a big thank you to Team Opposition to assume that all generalists are completely uneducated. Secondly, thank you for Opposition to pointing out that nowadays Opposition assumed that the jobs are like, if I present 4 degrees, I get a job. If he presents 1 degree, he doesn't get the same job. Then why do interviews exist in status quo? Why is it that jobs are not solely because of based on what you submit, but what you present to them, what you showcase to them as your own qualities, and not something that is on a paper, right? So this is something that Opposition completely missed. Opposition assumed that these generalists are completely uneducated. They're not going to even stand a chance against these specialists in their job. Well, number one, we're talking about college graduates in this situation. So they do have a bachelor degree that helps them out, right? So this is something that Opposition is completely assuming that we're talking that generalists are completely unemployed, completely uneducated, so they can't really stand up to these specialists, right? Now, moving on to the clash point. The first major clash point that Proposition tries to keep on pushing in this debate is about why is there a metric on our side of the house? Well, we would like to tell you that we've been constantly trying to point out that jobs isn't based on what you study. Jobs isn't based on what you present, right? Jobs is based on how you present, or how you are present, how you are working yourself in that particular industry, right? And this is something that a career generalist can do better, right? Opposition is ignoring the point, and Opposition brought up a point telling us that AI can replace generalistic jobs such as interdisciplinary things, whereas they cannot somehow replace technical skills like doing an operation or doing a program code, etc. Well, this is something completely ridiculous brought up by Team Proposition, as we ourselves know that nowadays all the jobs that require deep technical skills are replaced by AI, not the job. Do you really assume that a person can integrate 2 streams, or a machine can integrate 2 streams? This is completely ridiculous on their side of the house, right? And number 2, we would like to state that we are not against specialization. They keep talking and pointing it out that we do not want specialization to exist. We believe that specialization is bad. Well, we are trying to say that generalists should be prioritized based on the sole fact that a specialist needs generalists to thrive. One specialist needs around 5 generalists to thrive. So why is there a reason that you need more amount of specialists? Why are you prioritizing? Why are you sending more people towards the specialist size of the team when it is already overstrained, right? Like how my third speaker mentioned, over 10 to 15% of the people only receive jobs in what specialization they study. Most of the people go unemployed, right? So now, assuming our best case scenario, Opposition compared their best case scenario to our worst case scenario. Well, I would like to compare our worst case scenario to Prop's worst case scenario. In our worst case scenario, let's assume everything Opposition said is true, even though it's not. Why? Even though these career generalists do not receive the jobs they want, or they are easily replaceable, what happens on their side of the house in the worst case? They are not even able to get a job. Why? Because if their current job or their industry fails, they are less likely to get into another industry, right? Now, moving on to the second main clash point is about better employability. Who gives you better employability skills? We believe that our Proposition clearly wins in this standpoint. Why? Because number one, they only account about starting salary. While we are talking about long-term salary. By the time these specialists start their starters, generalists are actually reaching a situation where they are also earning equal amounts, right? And we have proved this by our first speaker. And number 2, accountability is something that varies. What a specialist is accountable for isn't something that a generalist is accountable for, right? And number 3, what we talked about was the third main clash point of this debate is about job security. Who provides you a better job and who stands out, right? Well, do you really think a person in status quo is going to stand out because he did masters in engineering? Or do you think a person is going to stand out because they did something extra than that? They integrated different streams. Which one stands out in status quo? They are differentiating status quo from ancient times. If you consider it 50 years ago, they win. But in status quo, we are the clear winners in this debate. With this, I would like to rest my case by saying that Op assumes generalism and only leadership and soft skills, whereas we are providing a generalistic whole as to why an average college graduate should prioritize and not some. Thank you.